Hey everybody, welcome back to Chipstock Investor. We need to review Arista Networks Q4 2024 and do a preview of Nvidia's upcoming results that will be out next week. Now, I'm trying to up my game here. Carol, if you are watching in, you challenged me to be more of a typical bombastic YouTube personality, so I hope you're happy. Here we go. Let's get into the key points on what we're going to talk about today with Arista and Nvidia. Point number one, Arista's fantastic quarterly update. They crushed earnings in Q4 2024, and they had an incredible outlook for 2025. We're also going to do a reverse DCF on this stock to see what the market expectations are at this point. However, point number two, Nvidia also ramping up their Ethernet business, their Ethernet hardware for AI. Is this a risk for Arista Networks? And then finally, we're going to tie this all back into the DeepSeek news from a few weeks ago. Does all of this new tech, all of this new development from Arista and Nvidia and Ethernet, does this mean more data center computing installs are needed? We'll answer that question for you at the end. Let's get into it. I cannot keep up that level of energy for very long. Sorry, I just don't have it in me. So I'm reverting now to my normal self. Let's just do a quick overview of where these companies fall into the semiconductor industry flow or the supply chain or whatever it is you want to call it. Companies like Nvidia, as well as Broadcom and Marvell, are fabless chip designers. They also have lots of IP and patents. We did a deep dive into that segment of the semiconductor industry last month. If you haven't watched that yet, that is an important one. It feeds into a lot of what I'm about to talk about here, as well as some of the other news that has been brewing, some of the rumors, maybe I should say, about Nvidia talking with companies like Micron and Samsung to develop new types of memory for AI. Give that video a watch. We'll link it below. But these fabless chip designers especially feed into the tech equipment and devices segment of the industry. And that's where Arista Networks and its networking, Ethernet-based switching and routing hardware business comes into play. Arista has counted companies like Microsoft and Meta, aka Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, as top customers for a long time. That continues to be the case. And as these data center operators, these hyperscalers, need more bandwidth as they adopt AI. Think of this as like expanding the number of lanes on a freeway and also the speed limit on those freeways. Ethernet, it seems, is becoming increasingly more important for operating these AI applications. So as you probably know by now, Arista's revenue in 2024 clobbered their initial guidance that they outlined this time last year for like 10 to 12% revenue growth. It came in close to 20% full year growth, up 25% year over year in Q4. But let's focus in on the guidance for the first quarter of 2025. We have some puts and takes here. First, the fantastic news, revenue expected to be up 25% year over year at the midpoint of guidance compared to Q1 2024. Now, you might be wondering, with this kind of guidance and the quarter that they reported, why did the stock sell off a bit, at least initially, after the report? This is probably why. Their outlook for non-GAAP gross margin and non-GAAP or adjusted operating margin of 63% and 44% respectively, that is actually down from Q1 2024. 64.2% adjusted gross margin last year and 47.4% adjusted operating margin last year. So down a little bit, but overall, all these numbers can be highly variable from one quarter to the next. So bear that in mind. And a little bit of a sell-off is perfectly fine. Look at that stock chart just over the last 5 years. Arista Networks stock price CAGR of almost 50%. That is totally bonkers. You can expect some elevated volatility in a stock like this as some of these guidance numbers maybe miss Wall Street expectations or maybe aren't as lofty as what the stock price demands. So no big deal here. We're not worried. And thanks to our friends at finchat.io for this. And the next couple of charts I'm about to show you, finchat.io, a fantastic platform to get everything you need all in one package to analyze businesses that you want to invest in. You get great high-level overviews from finchat.io on companies like Arista, like this chart right here, including valuation, backwards-looking metrics, and more importantly, forward-looking metrics. Included in there, you also have access to earnings call transcripts and earnings calls if you like to listen to those instead. Company industry events, you can listen and read transcripts of those too. I'll show you some quotes we pulled from FinChat's transcripts here in a moment, but all the way down to really granular stuff, like if you want to run discounted cash flow models and figure out what a fair value might be to pay for a stock like Arista Networks. So speaking of that, we did do an updated reverse discounted cash flow on Arista Networks after the full year 2024 numbers. And what we're trying to do with a reverse DCF is figure out what type of expectations are baked into the current stock price to get it to fair value today. As I'm recording this, after hours, February 18th, or before market hours on the 19th, stock trading for about $105. So what gets us close to that being a fair value? Running these numbers, I used trailing 12-month GAAP earnings per share, full year 2024 earnings per share of $2.23, free cash flow per share of $2.87, averages out to $2.55, and a blended per share profit growth of 13% for the next 5 years, and a terminal growth rate of about 6.5% after that. Discount rate of 10% gets us to fair value on the stock today. So the job for you as an investor is to now decide, is that a reasonable hurdle for Arista to clear? If you think no, that's an absurd expectation, you can pass. If you think that's reasonable, maybe it's a buy, but you have to decide that for yourself, as well as consider whether Arista even belongs in your portfolio at all. But I do think this is worth pointing out. After an incredible run in 2024, CEO Jayshree Ullal said this on the earnings call. So they remain optimistic about hitting their AI revenue goals for 2025. In total, $1.5 billion, including $750 million in AI back-end clusters utilizing Ethernet standards, open source Ethernet standards that Arista has built its business on. I'm going to come back to that here in just a moment when we do a little preview of Nvidia. But Ullal did take the opportunity to remind everybody of what their actual targets are. So we're coming off of a year of 7 billion full year revenue for Arista. Their target was 10 billion in annual revenue. And they had said to expect something like a low to mid teens percentage annual increase in revenue. So they are way above that target as we exit 2024 and enter 2025. Now expect that growth rate based on this guidance to decelerate as 2025 progresses. Ullal reiterated that the upper range of their 2025 revenue guidance is for double-digit growth of 17%. So they projected 25% in Q1. If you average that out, we could be looking at something like that 10 to 12% revenue growth in Q4 of 2025. Full year revenue of about 8.2 billion is what the expectation is. Bear that in mind. Don't expect Arista Networks to continue growing at the same pace it has been the last couple of quarters for much longer. At least that's the expectation. So let's move on to point number two. This may beg the question. Nvidia is also getting into the Ethernet-based networking business. Is the ramp up of their Ethernet-based systems a risk for Arista stock? Is this why Arista's growth rate is set to decelerate this year? We think the answer is no. We put together this and a bunch of other slides for you explaining the market dynamics between NVIDIA's InfiniBand. That's what got NVIDIA to where it is today. InfiniBand, especially in the back-end network AI training, That's where a lot of the hyperscaler, most of the hyperscaler money has actually been spent the last couple of years on NVIDIA hardware. So on the left there, you can see high performance compute clusters using InfiniBand, and then traditionally still using CPU based servers interconnected with Ethernet on the front end. But if you look at the little chart they have on the right, Arista thinks front end data center networks will continue to use Ethernet using CPUs and GPUs, but more of the back end will also begin to lend itself to Ethernet as well. That is the basis for Arista's guidance of 1.5 billion AI revenue in 2025, 750 million, or half of that, including back end Ethernet standards interconnect. So, if anything, this seems like it's Arista that maybe poses a risk to NVIDIA's dominance in AI networking, AI interconnects that connect those tens of thousands, perhaps in the very near future, up to 1 million GPUs interconnected with each other for training these massive AI systems. It's possibly NVIDIA that's at risk from Arista. And in fact, NVIDIA's InfiniBand based networking. InfiniBand is the technology they got from Mellanox, acquired back in early 2020, really lends itself for a lot of AI training, but especially as training gets more efficient, new methodologies for doing it come to market, it looks like the move is going towards Ethernet. And so NVIDIA announced the Spectrum X Ethernet systems as well. So NVIDIA's Spectrum X Ethernet platform is a more recent addition to the business. And as they began to scale that up, especially in 2024, they were getting a lot of growth, a lot of revenue contribution to their data center segment from these new Ethernet systems. But as NVIDIA has progressed through calendar year 2024, which corresponds with their fiscal year 2025, we're going to get the Q4 numbers here really soon. You can see the actual year over year revenue growth rate coming down significantly, especially in the most recent quarter, Q3 fiscal 2025, just only 20% year over year growth. If anything, it seems like Arista has a lot to gain here as a lot of these hyperscalers start experimenting with other types of networking other than NVIDIA InfiniBand. Now, this is obviously just one part of NVIDIA's networking business overall. There's a lot going on here, and so we're not worried about NVIDIA. We don't think Arista poses some existential risk to NVIDIA, but take a look at the two-part video we did back in November for some more details on the interplay between the two companies, because they are complementary to each other more than anything, I would say. So our third point here, how does this all kind of bring us full circle to the DeepSeek news from a few weeks ago when there was that brief little worry that somehow this new AI model, this breakthrough in inference, was going to somehow drastically reduce the need for new data center computing hardware installs. Is that actually true? You can read our initial write-up on that at chipstockinvestor.com, our blog section. Do check that out. We are actually relaunching the website here before the end of the month. Really excited about that and hope you like the new look of the blog when that comes out. NVIDIA and others were actually really quick to comment on this DeepSeek news and point out that this is actually more of a validation of the path that we're on, more than it is a risk for the pace of new data center computing installs. NVIDIA put out this great article, link below in this slide, where they talked about the three different scaling laws happening within the greater AI market right now. So let's start with that first one there, pre-training scaling. What is that exactly? This is the original scale up of AI. And this is simply the interplay between the size of the data set, the number of AI model parameters, and the actual amount of installed computational power. The AI itself scales up as all three of those things also scale up. So larger data sets, larger AI model parameters, and larger amount of computing power increases the power of the AI model that comes out after it's been trained. NVIDIA compared this almost to like an undergrad study. So if you think of AI as being like a student, think of the training it goes through as general purpose undergrad studies at a university. Now, what is post-training scaling? This has also been around now for a little bit. Post-training, you can think of after the general AI model has come out of undergrad studies. Now, maybe it goes through some sort of specialized training. Think of this almost as like a master's or doctorate level training after undergrad. So, like, let's say you want to train your AI to be really good at doing things for the medical field. That model can undergo post training. So, this post training, it puts that general purpose AI through some different methodologies to get it really good at more specific things tailored to specific industries or specific workers within a company to make the AI more useful for the job they need it to do. Now, what DeepSeek really did was reveal this new latest scaling, test time scaling, or long thinking, as NVIDIA calls it here. Think of this like asking your AI to take a very complex problem, maybe one that doesn't have a very simple, straightforward, cut and dry answer, and to think on that and come back with a well reasoned out answer. This is the purpose behind OpenAI's ChatGPT 4.0 and DeepSeek's R1. And it was the DeepSeek R1 model that seems like it was that tipping point where it was really, really good at coming out with these well reasoned out answers to big problems using just a fraction of the computing power as OpenAI's 4.0 model. And so this is test time scaling, getting the computing power in place so that the AI can efficiently think on these problems for a long time and come back with a well reasoned out answer that we, the human workers, can take a research for ourselves, make sure it's accurate, make sure it'll actually fit for the problem that it is we're trying to solve. And the point here ultimately isn't that this is going to kill the trajectory that we're on, rather, just the opposite. Some of these new methodologies involved with this test time scaling, like chain of thought prompting, sampling with majority voting, or search, just to name a select few, still requires exponentially more computing power than older CPU-based computing can offer. And that's the point here in the little quote box on the right from the NVIDIA article. Some of these AI reasoning computing tasks can use up to 100x the compute power. Now, of course, not all of them are going to, but let's say you are a software company, you're a software developer, and you want to embed a feature like this into your old plain vanilla CPU-based software. If you want to embed this new AI or an AI feature into your software, you are going to need more GPU-based computing power. And what does this mean by extension for Arista networks? Well, Ethernet, it seems, is becoming a really fantastic, efficient way to operate data centers, both on the back end for AI training, and of course, obviously on the front end, where the inference oftentimes takes place, where we input queries, let's say to ChatGPT or Google Gemini or whatever your favorite chatbot is, and we get an answer back. Ethernet it seems, is going to be the future standard. All of this is networked on and is based on. So these new tech advances from Arista and their Ethernet platform, as well as from NVIDIA, means more data center computing power needs to be installed. This is ultimately great news for Arista and for NVIDIA. Now, the ultimate takeaway for shareholders, we can't expect Arista to grow north of 20% for forever. Those days seem to be coming to a close. We'll see what kind of outlook NVIDIA provides us for calendar year 2025, fiscal year 2026, but the initial guidance is quite good, as all the hyperscalers have indicated their capital expenditures are going up because there are still a lot of older infrastructure upgrades and new infrastructure additions that need to be made to support their cloud infrastructure businesses. Customer demand for this stuff is still quite high, and we're still in the early days of building it. That will be a wrap for today's video on Arista's 2024 and 2025 outlook and a little preview on Nvidia. We will be having a live Q&A following Nvidia's fourth quarter earnings call over on Semiconductor Insider. Check that out. The link to subscribe to that is below. Join us on Discord for that live session that we'll be having next week. And that's also where you will find all of the research that we do, not just these limited videos that we're able to put together for you here on YouTube. So be sure to check that out. Thanks everyone again for watching. We appreciate you very much. Take care. Till next time.